Good morning, everybody. I am so excited to introduce to you all this very brave man and his story that everybody needs to hear. Brad Miller grew up here in Mooresville, North Carolina. He then graduated from West Point, entered the Army, and eventually attained the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He was serving as a battalion commander in the 101st Airborne Division at the time the COVID vaccine mandate was implemented across the Department of Defense. He was relieved of command for refusing to take the shot and subsequently resigned with just over 19 months of active service. Brad, welcome. I am so honored you're here with us today.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. And Brad and I, we coordinated, we planned this to both dress in our Christmas. No, I'm joking. He showed up here. We're both, in the holiday spirit. So.
Yeah, that's right. I think yours is a slightly more festive red, but yeah.
I'm slightly brighter, but we both tried.
That's good. No, it's good. It's that time of year.
Yes. So Brad, I live in Mooresville. You grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me what drove you to go to West Point.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm from here. I am, hometown Mooresvillian, happily from North Carolina. And I grew up here. I was actually born down the road in Salisbury, but I grew up here. I went through all of my school here, graduated from Mooresville High School, and then went to West Point. So for many years, I had considered maybe joining the military in some fashion. So when I say many years, like throughout high school, I had considered that. And so I decided that I was going to apply to West Point. I also applied to the Naval Academy. I ended up at West Point, and I did not know a single person who'd ever gone to West Point. I never visited West Point ahead of time, but I just showed up there. And
yeah,
it
was meant to be. Yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, I was not necessarily a model cadet in every way, but but I graduated and then went into the Army, and as they say, the rest is history, right?
Right. Awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong, you graduated at the top of your class at West Point, right?
That is definitely not true.
We could have rolled with that, Brad.
Yes. The problem is somebody would go back and fact check, and they'd be like, all right, class of 2003. And let's just say if they start at the top, they're going to be scrolling down a while before they find my name. So there are about, so my class was small. So there are approximately, West Point's I think their graduating classes, they're a little bit larger than my class. But if I remember correctly, there were, I want to say 846 in my class that graduated. And that was considered to be small. I feel like at the time, the average was more like 880s, 890s. We were a little bit smaller than that. Yeah. But I think now they've grown the sizes. So I'm not sure what they're graduating per year now, maybe a little over 900. But yeah, and I graduated in 2003.
Okay. I mean, you're going to date yourself with that, but we already.
It is what it is. It is what it is. But if you do the math, I graduated in 2003. It's now 2022. I was in the Army for 19 years, and yep, that's how we got to where we are.
And we're going to dive more into that. But it was 19 years, 3 months, 15 days, right?
Yeah.
See, I got that right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And it's incredible. And so everybody, like Brad's story is just, it's just crazy. And the timing is what I think makes it even so much more unique and crazy. So did you think you would serve a full career in the military? Did you enjoy being in the Army? Because when you and I first met last May-ish, I believe, this has been your entire life. It's all you've ever known. And so, take us through that, like some of the places you served. I'm guessing you did not see yourself ending as early as you did, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, when I was at West Point, I didn't necessarily know how long I would be in the Army. I didn't really know if I would enjoy it enough to make it a career. So I would say that when I graduated West Point, by graduating from West Point, you incur a 5-year commitment. So I knew I was going to be in for at least 5. And then as I started to serve that time, I did enjoy it. I will say, though, that there was so my 5-year commitment would have taken me to 2008. There was a time around 2009 or 2010 where I almost got out of the Army. And this kind of factors into the story, and we can maybe come back to this in a little bit. But the reason that I almost got out then was because I didn't know that I necessarily agreed with the direction of the government, and therefore foreign policy, et cetera.
Right.
I mean, I was starting to already have questions. Now, spoiler alert, I did not get out of the Army then, and I stayed in for another 10, 12, or 13 years or so before I actually before all of this happened. But So no, I didn't necessarily know that I was going to stay in for a full career. But then once I kind of got over those 5, 6, 7 years, that initial time when I thought about getting out of the Army, once I got past that, I for sure assumed that I would be in at least for 20. And I was even kind of looking at maybe I'll do 25 or something like that. That's kind of what I was looking at.
And just, for the average viewer, remind them, in order to qualify for retirement, you have to hit that 20-year mark, correct? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so what are some of the places you served?
So let's see. So I graduated. So West Point, for those who may not know, the military academy itself at West Point is in New York, just right up the Hudson River from New York City. So I spent 4 years there, obviously. And then my first duty station was also in New York, but much further north, Fort Drum. I spent a couple of years there, deployed to Afghanistan. After that, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. I was there for 5 years. I spent a year in Honduras, actually. So we have a very small base that we maintain in Honduras in Central America. I was there for a year. I really enjoyed that assignment. I went back to Fort Drum, New York. This was when I was a major. So I was there as a lieutenant. I was there again as a major, deployed to Afghanistan again. I went to South Korea. I was in South Korea for 3 years. I was there. It was an interesting time to be there. I was there. So I got there in late 2017. So the time period in which I got there was very much the fire and fury rhetoric from President Trump, and it was just very, very interesting because that's the situation that was going on in Korea when I got there. But then the Winter Olympics happened in Pyeongchang. There was a New Year's Day address from Kim Jong-un in which he congratulated South Korea for having been selected for the Olympics, et cetera. Tensions kind of start to ease and relationships warm. The next thing you know, we're having a summit between the two Korean presidents, North and South. And then there's a summit with President Trump coming over. So I was in Korea while all this was happening.
Okay.
And then after, so I was also in Korea when COVID began. And then in the summer of 2020, I came back to the States. I was in Kansas for a year. And then after that, in the summer of 2021, I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is the home of the 101st Airborne Division. And then that's where my career would end. So I got there in the summer of 2021. I took command of a battalion. And then this is about the time that the mandate went into effect.
Right. Just such a monumental time in history. So with all that said, when did you first become suspicious about the entire COVID narrative? Mm-hmm. And what made you suspicious? I mean, if you can choose, try to narrow it down, right? Like the glaring red flags everywhere. And then also, did you keep those suspicions to yourself? Did you talk about it with anyone else, in the Army? So tell me about that.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny because when we look back on it now, and I think to a large degree, people like us would say, look, the narrative is either crumbling or it's completely crumbled. I mean, how can people still believe this? I would tell you that when all of this first started to come out, and I'm talking before the injections, when we were just looking at whatever COVID is,
right.
I never believed the story. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I was Mr. Genius that had it figured out all along. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I did not believe the narrative. And I can remember this very clearly. So I was in Korea at the time. So in Korea, people were nervous because the story was, well, this came out of Wuhan. And so there's a phenomenon that already exists in Korea where they believe that a lot of pollution, like yellow dust, kind of comes across the sea from China into Korea.
Okay.
So Koreans believe that a lot of their bad air already comes from China. So there's kind of already this suspicion that, oh, we're gonna start to get sick here. Like that was a prevalent thought in
Sure.
In Korea as it is. So I would say that South Koreans were taking it very seriously. And I didn't necessarily know exactly what to think, but I was very suspicious.
Yeah.
I certainly did not believe stories about bats and wet markets. No. But I didn't know exactly, I'm not going to say that I knew exactly what was going on,
Right.
but I was incredibly suspicious. I did not necessarily believe what we were being told. So as we move forward through 2020, towards the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, I was extremely suspicious when the talk arose about some sort of injection or, vaccine is not really a vaccine.
Right.
So for me, there was never a question. There was never a day in which I said, maybe I should think about taking this thing. Like never. It was,
Right. And what about, all of the guys men and women you were surrounded with
Yeah.
in the Army? Like what was their take? Were you all like discussing this, and did they have the same viewpoints as you? Like, okay, something's up. This just all is not, adding up.
No, they did not have the same the same views as me. So it's interesting because when I left Korea in the summer of 2020, I went to Kansas. I went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, to participate in a master's program within the Army at an institution called SAMS, the School of Advanced Military Studies. We call it SAMS.
Okay.
So it's this this master's degree program within the Army, but you bring in all these smart guys from the Army, a lot of big brains there, and then me. And
then Brad. Oh, no.
And so this is from the summer of 2020 to the summer of 2021. So this is as the rollout of the shots is occurring, people are starting to take them, etc. But nothing was mandatory yet. And so we would talk about it, but I think people just, even very smart, very educated people, cannot think that they may believe that the government is corrupt. They would not believe that the government is going to just willfully lie about something like that. They just can't believe that.
Right.
They can't believe that the entire medical establishment is just so corrupt or so controlled or both that this could happen. I think most educated people, they can't fathom those ideas, sadly,
Right.
because I think that is what is happening.
Absolutely.
The government will kill you. The government does want to control you.
Yeah.
The medical establishment is completely controlled, and it doesn't stop there. I mean, most of our institutions are either entirely corrupted, entirely controlled, or both. But sadly, kind of back to your question, there were people who were suspicious. There were people who did not necessarily want to take the injections. I don't think they were as suspicious as I was, but they were at least maybe cautious.
Right.
I think a lot of that disappeared though once the shots became mandatory,
Right.
because they weren't.
And did you guys see that coming? Did you ever think they're going to make this as a mandate for us to continue to? You did.
Yeah.
You saw that coming.
Yeah. So I left Kansas in the summer of 2021. That's when I finished my study program, the master's program, and I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And so that's when I took command of a battalion. And so I took command of my battalion on June 10th, 2021. Just to kind of paint the picture, the timeline. So June of 2021 is when I take command. I've just shown up to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. August 23rd or 24th is when when DOD implements the mandate, and now the shot is mandatory. I am relieved of command at the end of October. So I was only in command for about 4.5 months. And in those 4.5 months, the shot becomes mandatory. And then, I refuse the shot, I'm relieved, etc. But on the day that I took command in June of 2021, I knew that it was only a matter of time before the mandate became implemented, and it would place me into a situation where I was probably going to get into a lot of trouble, probably career-ending trouble. So I knew that.
Right.
So on the day that I took command, I knew that I was going to be a commander for a short time, and I knew that I was on borrowed time. I mean, I knew. And in fact, I never even set up my office. So typically, a battalion commander in his office, he's going to have, all his plaques from his former units on the wall. You walk into the office of the commander, and it's very much like a shrine to himself. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
It's just him kind of commemorating what he's achieved in his career up to that point, which is typically going to be about 18 years. I was very typical in that for those who get selected for battalion command, which is a small percentage. So I feel honored to have been selected to have been a battalion commander, but that will typically happen at about the 18-year mark of an officer's career.
Okay.
So he's achieved a lot in those 18 years, but I never even set up my office because I knew that I'm not going to be here very long.
Right.
And so it was kind of a running joke with those right around me, because I would tell either because in a battalion, the battalion is commanded by a lieutenant colonel, but you have a command sergeant major who is like a career enlisted member who's kind of your right-hand man. But then you also have two other junior officers who are majors. And so they're the two most senior officers behind the commander. And I would tell my majors, guys, you got to be prepared for when I'm gone, because I'm probably any day now I may no longer be in command.
Right.
And my executive officer, who is kind of the second in command, I mean, we had a great relationship, but he would tell me, I think you're going to be okay. I think you're going to be okay. Like, no, I don't think I'm going to be okay.
You knew.
Yeah, I think at some point I'm no longer going to be in command, and you're going to have to be ready for that, because you're going to be the acting commander in my stead.
Right.
And that did end up happening. So,
Right. And so when that all played out, how did your, immediate superiors react when you told them you wouldn't take it? Because again, in your position, in our position, just as citizens, we're supposed to just listen and be obedient, right? Whatever is told to us, we're supposed to be these good human beings and just simply obey and be submissive, right? So what were their reactions personally to you? And likewise, your peer soldiers, were they like, Brad, come on, just do it, just take it? What kind of pushback did you get?
Yeah. So I informed my immediate superior. So as a battalion commander, your immediate superior is the brigade commander.
Mm-hmm.
And within the brigade, there are about 7 battalions. So for those who don't necessarily know what the Army looks like or what kind of numbers we're talking about, my battalion had about 550 soldiers in it. And there was another like 150 that kind of belonged to my battalion for administrative reasons, but that I had daily command and control over, about 550.
Okay.
But there are 7 battalions in the brigade. So my immediate boss, the brigade commander, well, he has about 4,200 soldiers in his entire brigade. So he has a lot of people he's got to worry about. So I told him, as I was coming into command, I told him, hey, sir, I'm not vaccinated. I don't plan to take it. And he said, okay, it's not mandatory yet. So this is in June of 2021. Okay. So this is 2 months before the mandate's going to come down. Yeah. But again, the writing is kind of on the wall. So I remember a month later in July, I don't remember what I saw on the news, but I saw something in the news or something that just reinforced in my mind that the mandate is coming anytime now. And so I told my boss again, this is going to happen. And I just want you to hear from me that my stance has not changed. I'm not taking it. And he said, okay. He's like, I hope it doesn't come to that. He said that. Yeah. So my brigade commander, who's a great guy, I really enjoyed working for him as a battalion commander, brigade commander relationship. I enjoyed working for him. I had no issues with him. Even with the whole COVID thing, he was cool with me. He was cool with me for the extent of our relationship, which was only about 4.5 months. Okay. But he was cool with me the entire time. Now, I think he was a true believer. I think he really believed in the shots. I have no idea what he feels now, but
Right.
and he wasn't going to go to bat for me once it came time to relieve me.
Yeah.
But he never gave me any grief. He was never hostile towards me or my decision.
Right. And the same with your peers.
Yeah. So my immediate peer group would have been the other 6 battalion commanders in the brigade.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they thought that I was making a really poor choice.
Right.
Um,
Because it's like, it's just easier to get it. I know, when I refused it and it started, well, you're not going to be able to go to concerts. You're not going to be able to go here. You can't
Sure.
go to this NFL stadium without showing your card. And for me, first world problems, right?
Yeah.
I was like, great. That's not an issue for me.
Yeah.
And the pushback was just like, but it's just so easy. Like, just show up to the pharmacy, go here. It's just and again, it just was mind boggling to me to see people like that.
Yeah.
Just roll over. It was just easier. And the biggest thing, and Brad, and you and I have had discussions about this before. So many people who were suspicious, like you and I,
Yeah.
right? Who didn't like mandates. They wanted their freedom. It was so paradoxical. They would say, well, I'm just doing it so I can have my freedom.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
listen to what you just said.
Sure.
By doing that is no freedom. So
if we look back on it now, right? So when we look back on what has happened over the last 2 years with the injections or 3 years with the whole COVID thing, you can see how they made it so easy to take the shots and so hard to resist, because it may be hard. I mean, some people were put in situations where you're not going to be able to visit your family for the holidays, like if we're talking a year
Right.
ago or whatever.
Or you're gonna kill grandma.
That's right.
It's on you.
It's on you.
The blood is on your hands. You're gonna kill grandma.
And if you get sick from COVID because you didn't take the shots and you die, that's also on you.
Right. Right.
So if you die or you kill someone else, that's on you because you didn't take the shots.
And then we see hospitals everywhere, certain medical staff, when people, if they did show up to the hospital sick with COVID, they just didn't even want to treat them. Well,
Sure.
So you're unvaccinated? Well, no, you just, you really don't deserve treatment. It just, I think
or you get the special treatment, the Fauci protocol with remdesivir,
Brad asked me before we went live, he's like, Greg, is there any buzzwords we need to stay away from? And right. Then I told him no. I said, no, we're just going for it. And it's so true. And it makes me so angry knowing, this is one of the biggest criminal acts against humanity
Sure.
that we've ever seen. And to know so many innocent people died that did not need to, whether it was from the vaccine, whether it was from being inappropriately, treated.
Yeah.
And then the biggest thing, and you and I have discussed this before, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, safe, effective product, cheap, effective products that work were being held from people that if given at the right time can treat these people.
Yep.
And so it's just mind blowing again, and I know I took you off course a little bit there, but it's right. It's just wild. There's just so many paths of just, this is criminal. This is criminal. This is criminal. And it's like, it can't be undone. It just cannot be undone. What's happened.
So it's interesting what you mentioned about something being criminal. So, something that I actually did not know at the time, but I know now, is when I refused the shot, I actually did not know that the mandate was blatantly illegal. Now, I certainly thought it was
ethically,
for sure, 100%.
Ethically,
and I was extremely suspicious from the very beginning that this was, had extremely sinister purposes. So I was never going to take it. But But now we know that there was actually like kind of a bait and switch or a shell game with various products, which makes it blatantly illegal. Even if you believe nothing else, the mandate itself was illegal. So if people aren't aware of what happened, and a lot of people are
everybody needs to listen to this part. And Brad explains this better than any other doctor I've heard explain it, any other expert. My mind was blown.
Yeah, and so, and I'll explain it, and I'll explain it kind of in layman's terms for people who want an even better explanation, or like from a doctor. There's a guy who's interviewed me who's a fantastic resource. His name is Dr. Sam Sigaloff, and he's a doctor in the Army. Just a fantastic guy, but he goes into much more detail with kind of the doctor's eye, if you will, into this, and then also the other battalion commanders. So there were only 2 battalion commanders across the Army that were relieved of command over this issue.
Okay.
The other gentleman, a guy named Chris, who I've gotten to know, fantastic guy. He was aware of this issue while still in command. And anyway, so let me explain what happened. So the mandate was implemented by DoD, I believe on August 24th, 2021. The day prior, August 23rd. If I'm off, I'm only off by like a day or so. The day prior, on August 23rd, 2021, the FDA approved a product which then allowed DoD to make the shots, mandatory.
Right.
So DoD said, we will not make the shots mandatory while there is not an FDA approved product. As soon as there's an FDA approved product, even if it's only one, we can mandate it, because if you have concerns about which one you're going to take, you can always take the one that's FDA approved. Okay, here's the problem. The problem is that the FDA approved a product which is not available. And that's a product that is known as Comirnaty or Comirnaty.
Mm-hmm.
Not available. So they basically, it's almost like they approved a ghost product.
Right.
That product it's under the Pfizer label. It's a Pfizer Comirnaty product. There's another product which is often referred to as Pfizer BioNTech, which was not approved, but it's also a Pfizer shot. And if you've taken the Pfizer shot, that's the one you've taken. And so basically there are 2 Pfizer shots. They approved one that is not available. The one that's widely available in the United States is not approved. Nobody really knows that because they don't know that there are 2 Pfizer shots. And it was very, very deliberately done. So they approved a product. So here's why that's significant. That's significant because if you are a soldier and you took the Pfizer shot because you say to yourself, I want to take the one that is FDA approved because I'm skeptical that these things are safe. I'm going to take the one that is FDA approved. So you go take the Pfizer shot. You think you're taking the one that is FDA approved, but you're not, because you're taking the Pfizer BioNTech shot. You're not taking the Pfizer Comirnaty shot. So you take it. Let's say you have some sort of serious adverse effect. Well, now if you think you're going to sue, because we've always heard that you can't sue the pharmaceutical companies. My understanding, and I'm not pretending to be an expert on this, but my understanding is that legal immunity shield goes away once a product is FDA approved, because in theory, it's been more thoroughly vetted. The problem is if you took that Pfizer BioNTech and you have an adverse event and you think you're going to sue, you're going to be told, but you didn't take the one that was FDA approved. Right. You took Pfizer BioNTech, which is still only under the EUA, the emergency use authorization, which means you, the person who took it, you assume all responsibility when you take it.
They're genius. I mean, you've got to give these
diabolically genius.
They are genius. And I think it was over the summer when you first explained that to me, and I was like, whoa, wait, what?
Yeah.
And it's still today, after all this time, the average person doesn't know that switch, has happened, which shot they've gotten, and why it's on them, because we're seeing millions of people coming forward who have either lost a loved one due to the vaccine, or they are completely impaired. Their life will never be the same.
Sure.
it's absolutely heartbreaking. I just know with my platform alone, I had to stop opening my inbox, Brad. It was getting to me. The thousands of messages that would roll in of people in complete despair.
Oh yeah.
Just looking for help. I did this. I was tricked. I was lied to. You know, my spouse died. My child died.
Yeah.
I can't walk. I'm always shaking. You know, all of these things, and it's.
I think that I always hold out hope. So I do think that for those who have taken the shots, I know there are doctors out there that are working tirelessly to try and figure out exactly, okay, what's the formulation that's really in these, so that if there is some sort of remedy available, we know where to start, we know what it is. And I think there's some people who are maybe getting close. Going back to the question of how did my peers react? Well, here's where it gets kind of interesting. When I took command of the battalion, I was very impressed with my peers. So the 7 battalions in the brigade, you know, all the other battalion commanders were just great officers, just really, really, really good dudes. When this situation happened, I mean, I've only heard from one of them since then. Mm-hmm. There's one who's reached out a couple of times. I have no idea what his thoughts are personally on this. They're all good guys, but either they don't understand what's going on, or they're not willing to give up their careers. But I always go back to this. You might have been able to claim ignorance as to what was going on 15, 16 months ago. Sure. You cannot claim ignorance now. Yeah. If you're claiming ignorance now, it's because you're willfully ignorant. Because these are all smart guys. I mean, battalion commanders in the Army are smart guys. So if they don't know what's going on, it's because they have questions in their head and they're not willing to seek answers to those questions because they're afraid of what they might find.
Right.
You know? And so I have many times, and I don't feel bad about this. I don't feel like I'm wronging anybody by saying this. I have said that DOD is run by criminals at the top, and it's enabled at all levels by cowards. And I stand by that. And so my peers who are in command across the Army, or, you know, at my level that are in command in the Navy or the Marines, whatever, right. They're cowards. I mean, I hate to say that, but it is what it is. We've all made mistakes in our lives. And on this issue, they're on the wrong side. They're cowards and they're liars, because they are knowingly going along with enormous, very, very dangerous lies. They're not just killing people, but they're also enabling an architecture of tyranny to be built around our country.
Is a mother of 5. That's horrifying to me, because this is just so much bigger. Do you know what I mean? This just has such an impact on all of us.
Sure.
It's such an unfathomable level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So your medicine is fake, you know, and it's not just the COVID shots. That's just the most egregious example.
Right.
But the whole medical establishment for a long time has been wayward. And now if there's some good that can come out of this, it's that people will wake up and realize that you can't trust your doctor just because he wears a white lab coat. And your doctor may not even be a sinister person, but he's in a system that clearly is totally corrupt. And I know I'm not a doctor, so maybe I'm on the outside looking in, sure, whatever. But there are honest doctors on the inside that are saying this too. You know, I mean, I mentioned one earlier, Sam Sigaloff, but I got others that have always been on the right side of this issue, and they're looking at their own peer group and saying, what is going on? So imagine being a physician that is in the military. So you're in these two closed systems or organizations of people, which are, there's a lot of gravitas with each of those organizations. And you're hearing it from both sides. The military is pressuring you to take the shots and to prescribe the shots. And then on the medical side, they're also pressuring you to take the shots and prescribe the shots to your patients. And so, I mean, I know physicians who are in the military that are getting it from both sides, and they're having to stand up against both the military and, you know, the medical institutions. Right. So it's just insane how we got here. But
and so many people, and this comment's going to lead into my next question for you. I've had so many doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, just different levels of the medical field, mm-hmm. Reach out to me, who said, I took it because, and they're scared to death that they took it, but I've got to put food on the table.
Yeah.
I've got to, pay for my family. They were left with no choice, which again, is just such another criminal act. And it's so, again, I just feel like I'm using the same words, criminal, heartbreaking, that they just felt, I know this is so dangerous and I know this is so wrong and I know it can kill me.
But what do I do?
But what do I do?
Sure.
Do I again, their backs were up against the wall, and it's just wild. And then there's you. And I know you and I became close. We had so many conversations on the phone. One of my first questions to you, which I've always been in complete admiration of you, completely just not on your side, but just because we felt the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We looked at all of these issues, on the same level. But I remember thinking, okay, if I were in Brad's spot, and this just makes your story that much more heroic and admirable, but you were so close to that 20-year mark. And I'm thinking, if I were him, God willing, I would not have succumbed to, and taken the shot, but would I have tried to push it out to that 20-year mark, which I'm just throwing myself under the bus. Would I have tried to finagle some things to just keep pushing it off as much as I could? So, I mean, honestly, Brad, 19 years, 3 months, 15 days, it blows my mind. Like, what made you feel like this has been my whole life?
Yeah.
I have served my country so honestly, so humbly. You've done everything right, and you are so close to that deserved retirement that you should receive, and that's going to be removed. That's right there. How? And when I spoke to you again, like, the peace that you had in your decision was there was just no regret. Like, how did you get to that place?
Yeah. That's a good question. So because it is kind of two different things. So I got relieved of command. That kind of effectively ended my career in terms of my ability to progress. Like, I'm certainly never going to get promoted to colonel, anything like that, right? But that alone did not kick me out of the Army.
Right.
I was just relieved of command. I was fired from that specific job. I was still in the Army. So when I got relieved of command, I was at about 18 and a half years. So a couple of months passed. So this is October of 2021. A couple of months passed, and in January of 2022, there is a memo that is produced by the Army, and it basically says, it says by July 1st of 2022, we're going to have a fully vaccinated force, except for a couple of people that may have exceptions. And remember, we know that there were very few exemptions that were being honored, but even if there were, except for very, 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 small amounts of people, everyone else is going to be kicked out if they are unvaccinated by July 1st. So that means, okay, the Army is going to kick me out by July 1st, which is still like at 19 years. It's not 20. I'm not going to get to 20 unless I find a way to stall. So I can either find a way to stall, I can let the Army kick me out, or I can resign. And that's the option that I chose. And so if I resigned, there was a moral reason why I resigned. And then there was also a practical reason. So I don't want people to think that I'm just some moral stalwart and that's great. I appreciate you, if you feel that way about me, but there was also a practical reason. So the word on the street was, and it was largely rumors. I don't think I had seen this written anywhere official. If the Army kicks you out over this, because you've disobeyed an order, you're going to be kicked out without even the dignity of being able to leave with an honorable discharge. Mm-hmm. So you're going to receive something else. And there was speculation as to what level of discharge you would receive. I think that's ridiculous that we're even talking about that, but that has happened. So now we have seen that happen to people. Yeah. If I were to resign, I would keep my honorable discharge because I'm not being kicked out over this misconduct, even though technically I had a mark of misconduct in my record because I'd already been relieved of command for refusing the order to take the shot. Anyway, so in my mind, as I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do, okay, I can resign. I will keep my honorable discharge, but yeah, I'm going to leave with 19 years and short of 20, and I'm not even going to try and stall.
Yeah.
So if I had tried to stall, how might I have done that? I could have put in for a religious exemption request. Now, I never did that.
And say that this is one of my favorite things that on your interviews that I've watched that you've done.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, Brad, why not? Why wouldn't you just try?
Yeah,
for
it's a completely valid question. So in theory, a process exists for you to gain several types of exemptions in which the mandate would not apply to you. There's a medical exemption and there's a religious exemption. The medical exemption would be, I've got this in my medical history. If I take this shot, it's going to be bad.
Right.
The other is, hey, I've got some religious objections, A, B, or C. I don't want to take the shots. Those processes existed before the COVID shot. So they weren't particular to just the COVID shot.
Sure.
But few people ever use those, Yeah. So with the COVID shot, a lot of people were opting for religious exemptions.
And were those being granted?
Virtually all of them were denied. I can't say all because there were a few that were approved. And I don't know exactly how accurate this is, but I heard that the ones that were being approved were for people who were almost out of the service anyway. So it's almost like, I'll approve yours because you're actually leaving the Army in 2 to 3 months.
Right.
So it won't matter, which means it's just a token approval so they can say, hey, we didn't reject them all.
Right.
I have heard that. I've heard that from multiple sources. I don't know exactly how accurate it is, but it is accurate to say that the overwhelming majority, and I mean like 99% probably, were rejected, or at least an extremely high percentage. Here's my personal problem with the religious exemption request. With my personal thoughts towards the shots, do I have religious objections towards the shots? Yes, and they are many. So That wasn't the point. My point was, we've all heard the stories about how these shots might have been developed, et cetera. I completely understand why people have religious questions. I have those same religious questions. My problem is that for me, it's, but I don't think the shots are safe. I don't think they're effective. I don't even think they should exist. So it's almost like I don't even necessarily get to the question of how were they developed? How were they produced? Are they using some sort of fetal cell lines? All the typical questions, all of which I think are valid, that have to do with how these shots came to be. But for me, it's, yeah, but I could have those problems and still concede the shots are safe or effective. I don't concede the shots are safe or effective. So for me, it's almost like I don't even get to the question about the religious exemptions. And I did not want to muddy the waters and say, I only disagree with the shots because of the way in which they were produced or developed. And I only want an exemption for myself. Because remember, I was in a situation where I was a battalion commander, which means if I had put in for an exemption and somehow, let's just say it had been granted, my command authority would mean I still have to order all my troops to take it. Now, in theory, they could each put in for exemptions, but you see where I'm still passing down an order that, I don't agree with. That's also kind of why I resigned, because by then, I got relieved of command in October of 2021. I sent up my resignation paperwork in March of 2022. During that, that interval of time there, that's when I realized about the whole bait and switch with the Camerati thing that I explained earlier.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized this thing is, I already thought this was bad when I was willing to lose my command over it, but this thing is like infinitely worse than even I thought then.
Right.
And I've done a lot of research on this. I don't know how the whole Camerati thing got past me in the beginning, but
and how is it still getting past people today? That's just it.
Yeah. I would say I probably found out about the Camerati thing somewhere around the turn of the year. I don't remember exactly, but that's what I'm going to say. So if I've known about that for a year and it's starting to come out more and more, if you're in command in the military right now, you're a coward, because this is happening. You've turned your back on the Constitution. You turned your back on the country. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was being placed in a position where I could either choose to continue to be loyal to my oath to the Constitution that I took as a military officer, or I could side with the Army. And there are too many people who are too in love with their jobs. And there are too many commanders out there in the military that don't actually understand what it means to be in command. Now, they're still in command and I'm not.
Right.
But I would venture to say they don't actually understand what it means to be in command, because if they actually understood the mantle of command in a paradoxical way, they would be willing to give that up rather than continue to go forward with the destruction of the military, the destruction of the country, et cetera, because that is what's happening. And DoD has covered up the health signals that have come through the military databases. You know, there are all these health signals that are kind of like, I mean, you can almost imagine just red neon lights that are flashing in the military databases, certain health signals that are very probably linked to, you know, the shots. Multiple military physicians, whistleblowers have come out and said, hey, what about this? And there's plenty of evidence out there that shows that DoD has tried to cover that up. And it's being investigated. There are lawsuits right now. We just have to see what's going to come of them.
I mean, it's just going to be so interesting to see how this all plays out. And I know right now there's a lot of talk within Congress and, you know, even the administration about the mandates and repealing it.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts there? I mean, has the damage already been done?
Yeah. So this has been the talk when it comes to this issue. This has been the talk for the last week or two. Is it a big deal? It's a big deal, but it's not nearly as big of a deal as people want to make it out to be. Yeah. And so I lose my patience with a lot of these Republican senators, because in my mind, this is political. So in my mind, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it look like they have won a victory for DoD. But in my mind, the victory is very hollow. So if the repeal goes through, okay, it looks like it will, that stops the mandate. But here's what it doesn't do. It doesn't like overturn the mandate. It stops the mandate, it rescinds it, but it doesn't overturn the mandate and come out and say, hey, we were wrong to have implemented the mandate, which means somebody like me who got punished, it means I still disobeyed an order.
Right.
You know,
it's just removing the mandate from continuing.
That's right.
To not get any of the follow-up,
that's right,
you know, boosters or what. And
yeah, I'm not exonerated now for having disobeyed that order, which I fully believe was illegal, unconstitutional, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Right. It just means that order will not continue to be given. There are many people who have been kicked out. There are people who have been kicked out without an honorable discharge. So here's the situation, right? So imagine that you have a young family who's stationed in like Alaska. Okay. You know, soldier in the Army, young family stationed in Alaska. He's kicked out, doesn't even get an honorable discharge. And he and his wife moved their family back home to wherever, you know, Texas. He gets a new job. His wife gets a new job. Their kids are in a completely new school. They have moved on with their lives. Okay. Now, at this point, we're not even reinstating these service members, but let's assume that we were. Let's assume that were to happen. So we're going to call this guy up and we're going to say, hey, guess what? We fixed it all. Don't worry. We fixed it. We just need you to move your family back, put your uniform back on. Yeah. And so that's not even happening.
Yeah.
They at this point, they are not going to reinstate those who were wrongfully kicked out of the military over this. But even if they were, it's like, that's not practical. This guy has moved on with his life.
Right.
So maybe he decides, you know what? I love the Army that much. I'm going to turn around. I'm going to move my family back. I'm going to go back to my old job in the Army. But a lot are not going to.
And what about you?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it. And I probably would not do it. And here's why. The issues in DoD are bigger than just this, because you got to ask yourself.
This is just one single issue.
Yeah. And how did we get here?
Right.
How did we get here? And we got to ask ourselves the same question when it comes to the government. So as Americans, we have to ask ourselves the same question. Well, like, how did we get here? So we can solve this problem. And I don't know exactly how you solve it, because there are a lot of people who have died or who are permanently injured, much of which probably can't be fixed. You know, I said earlier that there are doctors trying to figure out how to fix this. I hold out hope that a lot of it they will be able to fix, but you can't fix people who've already died of the shots. You can't fix people who have suffered some permanent injuries. So how do we ensure that these types of things don't? So how did we get here? And then how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again? And so I don't know, but I can tell you how it's not going to happen. I think people have to realize that, because the problem is much bigger than just our government, but our government is a huge problem. And so our federal government is not going to fix our federal government. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can figure out other solutions that might actually be, applicable. You and I have spoken about this before. I know you very much believe this, but first and foremost, people have got to understand this is a spiritual war. I very much believe that when I do what I do, a large part of it is because I firmly believe that God wins in the end. I don't necessarily know what that means for us. Does that mean that we win on this side or on the other side of death? I don't know.
Right.
You got to be prepared for whatever. But I know that I want to be on God's side, and that means resisting tyranny. And this is tyranny. And so I'm going to be harsh for a second. I'm going to be pretty harsh. People, and so I would just say, stick with me here for a second. People who gave in and took the shots, and they may have been painted into a corner, like you said earlier. I totally get that. But with things like this, it's important to understand this, because you're feeding the system of tyranny around yourself. You're feeding that system of tyranny. And to a large degree, it's built by our own compliance. So every time you went and you took one of those shots, you're feeding the system that is the agent of you were an agent of your own slavery at that point. So stop doing that. But also,
and can I just interject? Same thing. And I know this is so much more minor. Same thing with the mask mandates. Literally, the people looked at me like I had three heads. I can count on my one hand the number of times I wore a mask. And whether that was in church or in Target or whatever indoor place I was in, and everyone around me has them on. And everyone's just like, but Reagan, it's easier just to put on your mask.
Yep.
Like it's easier just to throw it on. And I'm like, you don't understand. Okay, maybe the idea itself of a mask is of course it's not at the level of these injections.
Yeah.
But it's still, it's giving in. It's giving into these unethical mandates and showing that, okay, the majority of us, we're just these sheep. We're just these sheep that are just going to follow you and obey and listen, because whether it's Satan using one of his favorite weapons, or it's our government, it's fear. Fear is such a powerful tool. And it's a
compliance ritual.
Yes.
It's a compliance ritual. You are complying with something that has no benefit, even though you're told that it's for a benefit, but we all now know that that's not true at all. Just like with these shots, any reasonable person now realizes that there's virtually no benefit. Like there's no benefit, all potential cost when you take these. But, and I don't want to personalize this, but I'm going to, because, I'm the one here, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So to some degree, and I'm being harsh for a reason, I lose my job, and I'm not the only one who's lost their job over this, but I lose my job because of so many people who gave in. The other side of that coin is the only reason that we still have any freedom whatsoever is because of the people who did not give in, So I mean it when I say, hey, all you people out there who are 5 shots in, you did indirectly contribute to me losing my job. That is true. Even if you don't know me, even if you live in, far away, the fact that you still have any freedom is kind of due to people like us, because if 350 million Americans were all 5 shots in right now, we would have shown everyone that we'll do whatever. We would have no freedom left.
Just roll over.
Yeah. Now let me continue with that thread, and let me come off of that a little bit. I also understand that everyone makes mistakes. I'm not a perfect person. There are plenty of times in my life where I have not made the right decision. There are plenty of times in my military career where I,
absolutely,
did not do the right thing, whatever, right? So I'm not saying that I'm the model citizen, the model military officer, or whatever. I'm saying that on this issue, I'm on the right side. There are plenty of people who are not, but there are also people who were fooled in the beginning and now have realized that they were fooled. And now they're on our side, and some of them are extremely strong voices against what's going on.
Yes.
And they were some of the ones who took, the first series of shots.
And those people, and if you're one of those people, please speak up. So many of those people are, they're humiliated, and they just kind of want to hunker down, and they're so embarrassed that they were fooled, that they took this, they have this regret. And people have said to me, Reagan, like, please don't, scorn me or judge me
Sure.
for doing this. And I'm like, who am I to do that? I would never do that to you. I'm so glad you now see. Praise God for that. You don't deserve that, because you were fooled. But
sure.
But also, in the same respect, people like Brad and I did not deserve what we went through. You've lost your entire career. We were, gosh, I got death threats. People told me my children should be taken from me.
Sure.
I've been called every name in the book, just for being so ignorant and disgusting, for choosing to be vocal about not, conceding. And it's been a hard couple of years, but I think it takes people like us. It takes people who have made those mistakes and are now owning up to it. And that is what's going to pull more people.
Right.
Honestly, I feel their voice is going to be more powerful than yours and I's. The people who originally took this, they were forced, they were afraid, they believed the lies. Your voice is going to be more powerful than you.
I agree.
Strong.
I agree.
This whole time.
I agree. And that's why I want to say that, there's a difference between the people who were fooled 20 months ago, maybe took the shots, woke up, totally regret it. I mean, I have a lot of friends and family that fall into that category.
Sure.
But then there are others who have gone to get their, bivalent booster and their flu shot same time, same day, just recently. Yeah. And those people, that is harmful, not just to themselves, but to all of us, sadly, because you're feeding into the system, and you're showing that, hey, there are plenty of people who will still comply with this. But for those who have started to wake up, I think it's important that we're not the ones who try and put the wall down between us and them, because we were on the receiving end of that for so long,
yes. Yeah. And it is, and it's, it's a lot of vulnerability and humility, and that's what it's going to take these people now. We need you to possess those qualities and to come forward and to speak up. And I don't care if you have 13 followers, if it's just within your own family. I mean, you have to be willing, as we're talking, Brad and I feel so strongly too, that this is a spiritual warfare. And it's not just this specific topic. It's in all areas.
Sure.
People have to be willing to find their hills they're willing to die on, and to never waver from that.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I am a very proud Christian, conservative, pro-life, mother. And it's hard to be, it's a hard time to be proud and vocal, on those issues. And for me, it's like, without coming across as arrogant. And I really like how Brad said this. I am such a sinful, flawed person. I have made so many mistakes in my past. And I'm going to continue to make mistakes. But I know with absolute certainty that I am standing on the right side, the correct side on so many issues right now. There's not one single doubt in my mind that this is not subjective. We're correct on this. There's like irrefutable evidence, scientific evidence, spiritual evidence. And for me too, it's always like,
you know what's interesting about that though? Isn't it interesting? Because I hate that we've had to go through this the past 3 years, right?
Right.
But if you are a Christian, how can you be surprised that this has happened? Now, I was surprised as anybody by COVID, but I mean, looking back on it, didn't we kind of know that this was how it was going to be at some point? And you just mentioned that, you know, looking at all the evidence, and now the scientific evidence is on our side. I would say it was kind of always on our side, but it was so well hidden.
Sure. Right.
But what that meant in the beginning was you had to trust your own discernment, because you weren't going to get the answer from science. You were not going to get the right answer from your doctor. You weren't going to get the right answer from your kid's doctor. You weren't going to get the right answer from your boss, who was trying to force you to take an injection and fire you if you didn't do it.
And even if you worked from home and you weren't going to be around any employees, all those people that lost some of their jobs too, or
right.
You're sitting at home, you're never going to get to work.
Right.
But to be safe.
Right. So you weren't going to get the right answer from all of these institutions. You were going to have to trust your own discernment.
Right.
So if you were, you know, fooled in the beginning, great. But it's just, there's a time to kind of have that introspective discussion with yourself and just kind of ask yourself, well, why did I fall for this? And we've all been there. We've all done that.
Sure.
You know, and I got questions, or I have things that I've learned about myself from this situation too. I mean, it hasn't all been, I haven't done everything correctly, you know? So I believe that this is a spiritual warfare. It's spiritual warfare. You have to kind of pick a side, because just like we've seen the last couple of years, you're not going to be allowed to sit on the fence.
Yes.
You know?
Amen, brother. Like, there is no more fence sitting. There is no more being lukewarm.
Sure.
I mean, just, it's in the Bible. And I think the biggest thing people have to get past is, you know, as human beings, we have this innate desire to be loved and accepted.
Yeah.
And to win people's approval. And of course, there's times I want those things too, but it's again, I'm beyond that. You have to get comfortable of being rejected and being ridiculed and being disliked, because Christ even told us that was going to happen.
What kind of Christian are you if you have no enemies?
Absolutely. And if you don't have enemies and you're not ticking people off, you are not doing it right.
Sure.
I'm sorry. If everybody likes you and you're just this chameleon that constantly, no matter what group you're in or what platform or people you're speaking to, if you're just trying to appease them, you're not doing it right. And not that I know we're going to wrap soon, and this is a whole nother rabbit hole that we could talk about on another episode with Reagan and Brad. But if people would just even look at, when you talked about this not being a surprise,
right,
even from a spiritual warfare standpoint, but looking at, for instance, let's say Bill Gates, I know of 3 videos that I've watched myself. Again, just watch the videos. They're there. I am not, again, I feel like a conspiracy theorist turned prophet, where, you know, he talks about the world being overpopulated.
Sure.
And to be such a good human and to save the planet and, you know, for the future centuries, how we really need to get the population down. And one of those ways, go watch the videos, is through vaccines.
Yeah, people don't believe that he ever said that, but it's like, but he did. I mean,
he did.
Yeah, it's out
he
there.
Did, and he did on a stage in front of people. He was filmed. He said it, and people are like, "No, he didn't." No, I'm
right.
like,
I get that, but he did. You know?
But he did.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those videos are so well hidden and censored, but he absolutely did. And I think the biggest thing for me, and when, you know, you've been having so many interviews and given platforms, and God has blessed me with a platform. And I think you and I also take it very seriously when we're given these opportunities. If we're not having this thick skin to speak truth and expose evil. When God gives us those opportunities, then, I mean, we're really missing the entire purpose.
Sure.
And Brad and I aren't, trying to be the bad guys here. It's truth is power. And there's just, again, so many people, the corruption and the lies have just been so enormous. People are so comfortable in that. Some people are still so comfortable because it's familiar. And these people, how could our government, how could the pharmaceutical industry, how could they want to hurt us?
Yeah.
They love us. They want to protect us. They want to help us. And this is the reality. They don't want to protect you.
Right.
They don't want to help you or keep you safe. And so, and I'm not trying to go too off course here. And so I think it's a time everybody has to dig deep. And like every day I pray for discernment, and then I pray for obedience. And we have a buddy joining us, the joy of live interviews. I think that's what everybody needs to do right now, because I know you and I have said over especially the last 6 months, Brad and I have been like, there's just two different realities. The reality that we're seeing and what other people are seeing. And so I think people really need to, and again, it doesn't end with Brad and I. Do your research.
Right.
Look into these things. Don't just take your doctor's word for it or the president's word for it.
Yeah.
And it's so fun to look back. Isn't it great to look back on Bailey? Hey, in all fairness, guys, I also have 4 dogs that I was trying to keep off Brad earlier. So at least it's only the cat. I mean, isn't it just fun? Like, I feel like as we wrap, one of the biggest things to awaken people that's right in their face is to look back at all the media, all of the health officials and the government officials who are pushing these things down our throat. And if you take this vaccine, you're not going to get COVID. You're not going to be able to transfer it. You're not going to get sick or end up in the hospital or die.
Yeah.
If you wear your mask, it's going to, all of those promises have absolutely been proven is lies.
Sure.
So if anything, please look at that. I just feel like that has to be the most glaring oblivion, like right in your face. And so that's why Brad and I just take it so seriously, sharing our personal experiences, namely Brad, and just for people, because I don't care if you're a parent, if you're single, if you're a grandparent, how many children you have. This information your life depends on it. I'm sorry, your life depends on
your spiritual and
your
physical
soul
life.
Depends on it.
And here's can I just one thing, and I know we're going to wrap up here in a second, but you said something really important there, which is spiritual freedom and physical freedom are inextricably linked, because if you're not free to worship how you want to worship, then your spiritual life will suffer. Now, there are plenty of experiences through history where people have been thrown in prison for worshiping. Yeah, sure. But by and large, particularly in the collective, like with your family and with your community, you're not going to be able to do that if you're not allowed. And what we saw, and I think this was deliberate over the last couple of years, is they will use excuses to try and shut down churches. They will, or to keep you from gathering in certain groups that are above whatever arbitrary number that they pick. And that's done deliberately. The other thing is, just like you were saying, I think people have to realize that the worldview that they grew up with, probably insufficient to be able to view the world and understand what is really happening. So you got to realize that a lot of history and a lot of what you hear, even about just the current geopolitical situation in the world, you got to remember that there are very powerful people, very powerful networks and governments, none of which are working for God, that have a vested interest in keeping you ignorant and in keeping your attention diverted from God and from the truth. And it's going to be it's going to be difficult to try and discern what the truth is. And I'm not telling you that I have all the answers figured out, but if you seek out no information, if you exercise no discernment, you will be wrong, because the default path will certainly move you into
absolutely.
just, where you're just not going to understand exactly what's going on.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe I've discussed this with many people. I think also you, that I feel this is a precursor to the mark of the beast. I really think we're seeing so many biblical things play out, and to watch how everybody was just like, yep, okay, I need to take it, like put it in me. And I will see as time plays out. I really do think this is the start of some of these big things to come. And it's really going to be, you're going to have to draw your line in the sand and say, no matter how hard this gets, no matter how bad this gets,
Yeah.
if it costs me my life, I'm not willing to cross that line.
Sure. What's your red line?
Yeah,
exactly.
And again, I know that's easier said than done, but, and like you said earlier, some of us might not see the reward here on earth, or might not see the final victory, which is God. And it might be, in the next life, but yeah, people are just really going to have to, there's no more fence sitting. You just have to look at these irrefutable facts, all of the evidence. And again, your life here depends on it. Your soul depends on it. And
I do think there is some hope. I mean, I think the situation is very bad. I don't like it when people try to pretend that it's not very bad. It is very bad. But I do think that there's hope. So I also don't like when people say that, oh, there's nothing that can be done. I think we've got to, prepare for the worst, because I do think that there's still the potential that things get much worse.
Right. We still have 2 years left, Brad, in this administration. Like, I always say jokingly, but seriously, crediting this administration, like, I knew it was going to be so bad, but they have, like, you know what, guys, they're just taking us down the hole so much faster and so much worse than I thought.
Sure.
So I absolutely think, and even from in all areas, we're like hearing from farmers, an agricultural standpoint, like things like what's happening there, to the food chains, and just all around, all areas, all walks of life. I do fear it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. You just got to be ready for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mentally, I mentally even more so than physically.
And be prepared to understand that everything you hear may still be false. Just because everyone tells you that it's true doesn't necessarily mean that it's true.
Right.
Right.
And so that's why Brad and I would always struggle too. Like when we, especially over the last few years, were in the minority group.
Yeah.
People would say, doesn't that make you worried? And I'm like, no, it just validates.
Yeah.
It truly validates for me on so many different levels that no, I'm on the right side.
Exactly.
I don't want to be following the billions off the cliff. And so that only reassured me.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. So anyway, Brad, as we close here, and I'm so grateful that we got to sit down with you coming into town, and your story's really taken off. I say it's so unfortunate. It's such an, unfortunate circumstances, but it's so heroic. It's so admirable. And I'm so blessed that, you've come into my life, and you've inspired so many people and awakened so many. So what's next for you? Where can people find you?
So the easiest place to find me is probably on Twitter, which I've only been on for about 4 weeks, but it's been good. That's probably the easiest place to find me. So just at Brad Miller 1010. So just, at Brad Miller 1010. What's next? I don't exactly know. I've not gotten a new job yet. I'm just taking my time surveying the landscape. I also feel like things are so tricky right now that I want to be very deliberate with what I'm going to do next and how to use my time. And I got to make sure that I'm on the right side in the fight that's ahead for whatever's coming. So I'm just kind of taking my time to figure all that out. And the last thing that I'll say is I'm very appreciative for people who are willing to stand up, because here's the other thing that we saw. We talked about those who were maybe a little bit fooled in the beginning,
Right.
but then woke up.
Right.
But we also saw people where they went in the other direction. They were strong and strong and strong and strong and strong until they weren't, and yeah. And so again, we've all been there. None of those are terminal decisions, at least spiritually. I mean, in theory, it could be terminal physically. You could take a shot and then things go real bad. But none of those decisions are going to be entirely deterministic spiritually. So you screwed up. There's always time to, come back on the right side, and just make sure you're prepared for whatever comes next. And I would say prepare yourself spiritually, and then prepare yourself physically. Figure out your money situation, figure out your food situation, figure out what you're going to do for medical care, because you're not always going to be able to trust the the medical establishments. But and then last but not least, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for inviting me on your platform, and and Merry Christmas to everyone, I guess.
Yes, Merry Christmas. I can't believe it is Christmas Eve.
I know, right? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, it is.
It's wild. It's wild. And so everybody, I jokingly said, don't claim 2023 as your year. That's gone bad the last few years. People are like, this is my year. Everything's going to turn around in the world. Nobody say that. Let's all go into 2023 very calmly.
Yeah.
But no, Merry Christmas, guys. I'm so glad. Please share this, even if it's not on one of your public platforms, even if it's just with one single family member or a coworker or a friend who needs to hear some of these points. I think there's a few things in here that everybody needs to hear or to be reinforced with. So share this. And Brad is so great. He's been getting inundated with interviews and I know he has more to come. But I also know you're great at, a lot of people reach out to you who want to talk to you, bounce some things off of you. So I'm sure Brad would be open to that if people wanted to reach out.
Sure.
To you.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. All right. Well, Brad, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. And I really do. I think maybe we need like an episode 2 at some point.
Okay. Let's do it for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Take care, guys. Merry Christmas.